welcome back. Now, have a conversation with almost anyone and you'll find out at least one or two people have dreamt about writing a book. Whether that book is a memoir, a romance novel or a children's book, the ideas and inspirations are plenty. But ask that same person how their writing is going and you may learn that they are struggling with what we know as writer's block. Well, if you're one of those people, help has finally arrived. Writer and writing coach Romy Sommer has just released her 7th novel titled My Fake Italian Marriage. She has navigated through all the stages of writing a book and she joins me now to help budding writers fulfill those dreams and aspirations. Welcome to Newsnight. Absolutely lovely to have you here. I think most of us have at some point gone through something that made us think, gosh, I need to write a book and tell my life story. But it's easier said than done. When you have aspirations of perhaps writing a book, whether it's a novel or a memoir or a children's book, as the intro stated, how do you even start turning this little idea that you have in your mind into a novel or a book?
You're right, it is a lot harder than people think it is.
Yeah.
My advice is just sit down and start writing, because we can think about it, we can learn about it, we can talk about it, but it's really the sitting down and writing that is important.
Mm-hmm. And I want to perhaps go back and talk about this platform titled Now Novel. You are one of the coaches at the platform. Talk to us about what the platform is and how it assists.
Great. Well, Now Novel is a South African-based company, but we have a global audience. So we have clients from around the world, including South Africa. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's one of the joys nowadays of working online and being able to connect with people around the world. And our purpose is to help people, exactly as you said, get over that writer's block, figure out their story. That's my favorite part of the job, is brainstorming stories with people and helping them work out, unravel the knots.
Yes. So if someone, has aspirations of writing a book and perhaps they don't have access to a coach and someone like you who can guide them in brainstorming and figuring out where to start, what are some of the tips and tricks that you want to share with someone that'll make it possibly a little bit easier to start figuring out the direction that you need to go in?
The first thing I think is to study story, and really we all have it in our DNA. We're raised on television and movies and books.
Yes.
So read a lot, watch a lot of television and absorb story structure. That's the first step. And after that, sit down and start writing, because that's really how you learn, is when you're trying to work with the words on the page and put them together and make the story hang together as a cohesive whole. I find a lot of people give up. They get the writer's block, they hit the middle of the book, they realize it's harder than they thought, and they want to give up. And my advice is just keep powering through, because really until you've written an entire first draft, you don't know what you're dealing with. And then you go back and edit.
Yeah. So let's talk about that moment where you perhaps are on the verge of giving up, you've reached writer's block and there's just nothing is happening anymore, or you just feel demotivated. How do you overcome that point in your writing experience, and what are some of the causes for getting to that point?
That's a great question. There's one of two possible causes. So the first thing we do is try and diagnose, is it a story problem? Is the problem with the story itself, that maybe you've run out of steam, the plots, the conflicts aren't working out? Or is it an emotional problem? Sometimes life gets in the way, or we start to doubt ourselves. We hear these voices in our head saying, I'm not good enough, I'll never finish. And depending on what the cause is, we then diagnose it and try and push through and fix it.
Would it be appropriate to put a timeline on you, or is that just additional pressure that you shouldn't? Would you advise someone to say, within the next year, I want to be done with this first draft, or should you just let the inspiration flow and you finish it when you finish it? How would you advise when it comes to timelines?
It's very much dependent on the person. Some people thrive on deadlines and hitting targets. Other people find the pressure just blocks them. So when I work with clients, I try to work out what they need and work with them.
So once I've written my first draft and I have it, should I let friends and family perhaps read it so that we can figure out if it's any good? What would be the next steps after I've got my first draft and I've moved past that phase of writer's block and the saggy middle? I'm not sure what the saggy middle means. I read it in your press release, but once I've overcome that part, what is the next steps for me?
Yes, absolutely. You could have friends or family read it. I would suggest trying to find a reader who reads your genre, who knows that genre. So, for example, I write romance novels. I would try to find somebody who reads romance and actually understands what readers are going to expect. You could also find beta readers. There are lots of resources online to find critique partners who are fellow writers, and you sort of swap work with them and you give feedback on their work and they give feedback on yours. So there's lots of opportunities. Obviously, a coach can help.
Yes.
But if you can't afford a coach, there are lots of writers' groups that can provide that kind of help.
And then obviously for a first time a writer and someone who's perhaps wanting to publish their book for their first time, managing agents and navigating the publishing space can be extremely daunting. There is also the concept of self-publishing nowadays. It can be very scary when it's your first time. How would you suggest new writers navigate this space in figuring out how it is that you are going to get your work out there?
I've done both. I've self-published and been with a traditional publisher. So
yes.
There are challenges in both directions. I would suggest do your research, figure out what also works best for you. Some people love the self-publishing because they want more control over the end product. They're entrepreneurs. And other people want to sit back and let somebody else do things like design the cover and decide the title and a marketing plan. So decide what works for you, research it, and then just go out and have fun. It's wonderful being published, and it's such a fun process.
Yeah. Talking about fun, would you suggest starting out this as sort of a side hustle? Would you suggest going full force and making it your main source of income? How lucrative is this space?
Sadly, most writers are never going to afford to buy an island in the Caribbean. So I wouldn't recommend on sort of expecting to make a lot of money on your first book. You also have to hit a sort of bell curve. I think after about book 5 or 6, you start to make decent money. The first book usually, a lot of writers are disappointed in their sales on the very first book when they're a debut author. So yes, I would suggest start it as a side hustle, learn the craft, develop, and then eventually there are a lot of people making a living at it, so it is possible.
Yeah, well, you're on your 7th novel, so doing the math, I'm assuming that you are doing quite well. Talk to us quickly about your 7th novel. It's titled My Fake Italian Marriage. What is it all about?
Well, it's actually my first ever South African character.
Oh, interesting.
And she lands up going to Italy to work on a wine farm. She's actually a banker, and it's a romance, so of course there's going to be a guy on the wine farm that she's going to fall for. I love a good romance. I love one.
Who doesn't?
We all need that bit of escapism.
Yes.
So it's published by HarperCollins London, and I've been very lucky because I'm with a nice big publisher. They've sold foreign translation rights, and they've put the book into places and markets that I wouldn't be able to do on my own.
Fantastic. I love that. So, Romy, if someone wants to reach out, quickly engage with you, maybe ask you to assist, how do they reach out to you? Where do they find you?
Well, I have my own website, which is romysommer.com, and we also have the Now Novel website, nownovel.com. Now Novel is great. They've got a blog that is chock full of advice for beginner writers. Fantastic. And webinars and all sorts of fun things that people can explore.
Fantastic. Romy, thank you very much for your time and sharing in your story, and I wish you all of the best for the future.
Thank you.
My pleasure. That was writer and coach Romy Sommer chatting to us about if you perhaps have aspirations of one day writing your own book or your own novel. Those are the tips and tricks that you can implement to get you from point A to B. Also, Now Novel is a fantastic platform for educational purposes as well. So definitely have a look at them online.